Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about layers part three. And just to give you a little refresher, the first part of layers we introduced was the basic concept of using layers. Our second type of layer exercise was in part two was to create a composition using different pieces from different sources. Our third layer example here will be talking about and utilizing layer masks. The layer mask meaning, if you didn't know what it was, layer masks basically allow us to create areas of transparency on specific areas inside the image or the active layer. It's kind of like a concentrated area that's non-destructive and allows us to add transparency. So what all that means in a nutshell is I can edit or manipulate an aspect of this image, one small area, a tiny detail, and manipulate that and create different aspects of that or do different modifications, coloring, manipulation, whatever it might be, but not actually change the background or the original image that you're looking at right now. What it actually lets me do is put almost like a layer, a sheer layer on top, or a transparent layer on top, sorry, that I can manipulate. So I will give you an example and we can go from there. So in order to use layer mask, we should probably add alpha channel to our background layer. And I'm over here on the layers panel. I'm not sure where your layers panel is. What I like to do is have undo history open on top, layers on the bottom, and tool options open on this side, and just tool options. So tools and tool options. This is kind of like a giant toolbar. So for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to take our clone stamp tool, just get that loaded, and we're going to come back over here and we're going to add a new layer. I'm going to call it, I'll call it orange. Oops, spell that correctly. And say okay. There's my orange layer. And what we want to do is we want to clone stamp some of these items on here. So I'm just going to zoom in and get my brush a little bit bigger. And we're going to take a picture of a clone stamp picture of, let's say, this whole piece right here. Now I'm control clicking to capture that. And I'll just come over here and we'll just paste what I did. So I'm not worried about how it looks yet. That's not an issue, even though it looks ridiculous and out of place. And actually, maybe what we'll do, just to make it a little bit clearer, let's overlap. That's actually a good idea. All right, we'll clone stamp again. And we'll plop it in right here, just to give you an idea. Okay, so we have that. We don't like what we see. It looks out of place, doesn't look right. This is where the layer mask comes in. So layer masks use white and black alternately for foreground and background color. White is actually full opacity, and what it does is allow you to paint in your selection, where black is transparency and allows you to paint in the background. So that's easy to say, hard to understand. I will show you now. So we're going to right click on our layer orange. Now we can come down here just so you can see it. We can say add a mask here, or we can right click on it and say add a mask here, or we can go up to layers, having clicked on orange, and say add a mask here as well. So lots of options for you. I'm going to right click the easiest, most direct way and say add a layer mask. I'm going to make sure it says white full opacity, and I'm going to say add. And now that I'm on that layer mask, I have white selected, which white equals the orange. So just so you can see, I'm going to toggle off the background layer. What white equals right now is that, what you see visibly right here. That's all that white equals. What black would equal is this. So if I want to paint this back in, I use black. If I want to paint this back in, I use white. Okay, so for now, because we're on it, you can see I can select the layer itself, or I can select the layer mask. I'm going to choose the layer mask. I'm going to come over here and switch to the bottom two colors, black and white, and that's my foreground and background color. I'm going to make sure that I've got my black set as foreground. That's what I want to use. And then I'm going to go to my brush. I'm going to make sure my brush isn't too big, which it is right now. So I'm going to lower it down. And I'm going to simply use black to paint back in the background. As you can see, it's already working, and you kind of understand now. If I went too far, I want to switch to white and simply paint back in my selection. So that's what a layer mask lets you do. You can paint black for the original background layer, or you can paint white for the current selected layer. And it's non-destructive because the background remains behind. As you can see, when I'm painting in this, the background is behind it. If I toggle off, or toggle that off, so this is just a piece on top of the background. The background is not touched, so it continues to keep its integrity. So for this case, zoom in. Let's get close, and let's keep going. And just get that right in there. Now, for areas like that, it's a little tight. You might want to, change your opacity down or use a fuzzier brush to kind of select that and get that in. So I'm going to go back to white, and I'm just going to creep it over, give you an idea of how that works. And we're going to move it over like this, all the way around. And I can sort of blend a little bit better. You see that's not completely opaque, so it's not replacing the whole the work I just did on the background. It's just helping me with this section. And that is kind of a rough section to work on, so we're just going to continue that way, creep it up, get rid of most of it. And again, brush size matters. Get that brush size down, make it a lot more manageable to do this. And once the orange is in line with the rest of the peel, I wouldn't really worry too much about how that looks. I get it in there for the purpose of this demonstration. This is what we want to do. And when we zoom out, we're a little bit better off. Switch back to white. And we'll get back our hardness and just creep that out in line with the edge of the orange. As you can see, there we go. Down along the bottom, same thing, at the edge of the orange. And we are down to having copied that over. Let's switch back to black again. And, no amount of times is it a problem to switch back and forth. It really does make a lot of sense to keep doing that. Now, there was a spot here where I did have some pomegranate, and I'd like to see where that went. So I'm going to kind of pull that in, switch back to white, and there's my pomegranate seeds. I'm just going to paint those in. And I think I had one or two up here, didn't I? So we'll just paint those back in, just to give it some contrast. Now we're going to lower our brush down, switch back to black, and we're going to kind of come around the pomegranate seed. Again, this is where opacity will help. Or sorry, I should say fuzziness will help. We don't want to do too much of the pomegranate or take too much away. Let's creep that out and creep that out. And just for the purpose of this example is why we're doing this. So I'm not going to go too far with it. I'm going to paint this back down just to fill that in a little bit more, make it a little bit more realistic, but I'm not going to go into any great detail like I might have done in other circumstances. And in fact, I like that shading where it was, so I'm just going to undo a little bit of that. And we're going to switch this to fuzzy. We're just going to creep up on it just to get the shading. As you can see, that has a much better effect than that straight line that we did see. And same thing over here. We can lower opacity as well as another part of our brush tool. And we don't want to go that far, but you get the idea. We can lower the brush size and just creep in there. Try to get enough of it done. Switch back to white. And just make sure we keep the integrity of these things here. Sorry, we were on black. We need to stay on black. Oops. Opacity should be up. Okay, anyway, enough fooling around. There we go. That is a layer mask at its best. We've just added this over here For the purpose of this example, we're going to leave it, but I did want to point out that we have something called layer modes here. We'll talk about this more in another example, but the idea here is we can adjust that selection in a number of different ways. As you can see, I can lighten, darken, soft light, hard light. I can, this is all lighting and illumination. Darken is all darkening and burning and linear burn, etc. And I can play around with these modes a number of different ways, but the idea is to apply one to see what it does. In this case, I'm just going to take this layer mode, and I'm going to come up to colors, and I'm going to go to hue and saturation, which we can also play around with here. And I'm just going to use my slider just to give it a little bit of, maybe we'll go lemon lime look. And just to give it a little bit of contrast to the rest of the picture. The other thing we can do is we can select the kind of, difference or color we want to make, or what we want to track here by selecting one of these inside, or just click on master to kind of adjust all the color. So we can go deep red, we can go up to, I can do lightness here, I can darken, etc., but I'm only adjusting that layer. I'm not doing anything else to anything else on the image, which is what I like. And that ties it in a little bit better. So we'll leave that up, maybe increase our lightness, make it a little bit bright. Sorry, that would be our hue. Make it a little bit brighter. And change our saturation. And when I'm done playing around with hue and saturation, just as an example, I close it. Sorry, I should probably go back and make sure I keep my changes. So we'll bring that down, and we'll bring this up a little bit. And we'll change lightness. Make it pink grapefruit, and we'll say okay. And that is one way to adjust your selection. So you know how to select, to basically when you do select something, I should say, you can adjust the color as it goes. One other tool we wanted to show you was to make a new layer here. One thing we wanted to add, I should say, was to add text. So we're going to take our text tool, which is up here, text tool, and I've added a new layer and I've selected it. And I'm going to call this text. And now that I'm on that layer, I'm going to come down to the bottom and I'm going to draw a text layer right here. And inside that text layer, I'm on 62 in terms of size. I'm going to type citrus. And I'm going to bold it so that it's nice and big. And these are your bold options here. I also think that I might change the color to white. Get that up in the corner on white and hit OK. And we'll make that just a little bit bigger so it fills the page or fills the bottom. Now, in order to make this a little more interesting, I want to move this. I want to move this text. I'm going to have to do that with the text tool, I think. I want to move this text up here and under a little bit of this stuff. So I don't want it too much that I can't understand what the word is, but I do want things to come through. So what we're going to do is another layer mask to the citrus, to the text. So I'm going to say add layer mask. And I'll make sure it's white, full opacity. And make sure I'm on it when I do this. And I'm going to switch to black and my brush on this side. And make sure my brush isn't too big. But when I come in here, as you can see, I'm going to draw in where that fruit wants to be, just to give it some contrast. So we want to get right in here to do this. I'm going to draw in, and now remember that the background layer is black, so I am painting in the background layer to put the lettering behind it. Now, some people might say, well, why don't you just put change my layers over here to put one on top of the other, but that's not as fun. And this is more interesting, and this doesn't manipulate the whole image. It just does the isolated pocket that I'm working on. So there is a reason for this. I'm going to lower this down even further just to get my R back in. And we're going to come over here, make sure that we've got it all covered over here too. So back to black and get the rest of my lemon back. Don't go too far, just enough. And again, you don't want to place your text too far behind the background. You really do want that to show through and be obvious as to what you're actually what the word actually says. So, oops, that's the wrong color. I do see that part of my pomegranate here might be cut off. Just making sure. I think that's all in place. And part of my letter is, please excuse my dog. And we'll just get in there. Zoom right in. Lower my brush down. Now, what I like to do is I'll go over it first, right down to a pixelated level. I'm going to go over it first, white, and then I'll come back out and I'll do just a spot, a little touch black back in. So that lets us actually get a little bit better. Okay, so we put citrus behind using a layer mask. We've created a new piece using a layer mask. We've played around with, these are normally in Photoshop. You can do adjustment layers. We're using these things: shadow, highlights, brightness, contrast, hue, curves, levels. I didn't choose to do one of those. I chose hue and saturation for this purpose, but you can cut out any one of these pieces and manipulate it using a layer mask. But the idea is make sure your layer mask is covered, selected when you're doing it. And again, black and white have to be transferred between to paint in or remove aspects of your composition. But in general, in a nutshell, that is how to utilize a layer mask.